Eu sou Mariano de Arcos e você está assistindo Guerrilha Cultural. Okay, we are live now. Hello there, everyone.
Oh.
I'm really glad to have you all here in Guerrilha Cultural. Today we brought up one of the most well-informed political analysts of our time, Mr. Jeffrey Nyquist, to talk about China, the Chinese plague, and the racial riots in America. This is the beginning of an initiative to create a bridge between Brazil and foreign intellectuals in a great cultural exchange. So let's begin. Good afternoon, Mr. Nyquist.
Good afternoon, Mariano.
Well, I would like first to assume my viewers don't know your work. So let's start with a very essential question. We are talking today about a communist regime that is threatening the West, I mean China. How come, after the fall of the Soviet Union, we are still talking about the communist threat? Shouldn't it be a thing of the past?
Well, it never went away. People were sold, they were sold a bill of goods. This is an American expression. The Communist Party Soviet Union went underground. It retained control of all the institutions of the Soviet Union. But it was very useful for the Soviet Union to go, Soviet Communist Party to go underground, because then they could be more effective in Europe and the United States, Canada, Brazil, throughout Latin America. And this was where they could make real ground, because the great problem the communists had in various countries in organizing was that people were afraid of Soviet power. But if you suddenly said there's no more Soviet power, well, then why should we be afraid of communism? So then the communists, and also the communists could moderate themselves and sound more like leftists who were, more like China. We can accommodate capitalism. So what's wrong with that? And then they could openly work with China in various venues, which they've done in Latin America. And of course, they could have out of one side of their mouth radical talk about social justice and revolution and whatnot. Out of the other side of their mouth, talk about China in business and Russia in business.
Yeah, but I think how come the most powerful nations on Earth, with tons of money to dedicate to intelligence, could fall so badly in the hands of the enemy? How could this happen?
You're talking about the United States?
Yes, I think mainly, but I think almost all the nations in the world that have this kind of problem now, I believe.
Do you see the big misconception is that the United States had strong intelligence services? Before World War II, the United States did not have an intelligence service to speak of. We had, the Army had intelligence, but there was no American intelligence service. The FBI mainly is focused on white collar crime. Its counterintelligence abilities are more in legend than in fact. The United States had to sort of generate during World War II a kind of intelligence capability out of nothing, with help from the British, who, by the way, were heavily infiltrated by the communists at the time that they were helping us form our intelligence services. And that's the problem. That's one of the problems that we were having.
Yes, I mean, when you talk about Latin America, we believe in a legend that the CIA was like after all that happened in Latin America in the last century. But I remember I was reading a very important work, I think, for Anatoly Goslin. I don't know how to pronounce his name, and he was saying that he was talking exactly about Brazil. And I remember when I was younger, I was teach in school that America was all behind everything about the military dictatorship and all in control. So you're saying that this institution is not actually as powerful as they are telling us.
The CIA is the gang that couldn't shoot straight. The CIA is you ever hear of the American TV show Get Smart?
I don't think so.
It's about a bungling American intelligence operative who's always bumping his head and slipping on banana peels. And it's pretty much accurate. Look, the United States, you give Chile for an example. Do you think the Chilean generals overthrew Salvador Allende because of the CIA?
I don't know much about the situation of Chile,
No,
but
no, because the CIA was worried about Allende, and they went to the Chilean generals, and they actually kidnapped a Chilean general, and I believe it was a general, maybe it was a colonel. They
oh,
kidnapped him, and he died because they mishandled it. I forget what it was that caused the death. It was accidental. And the idea was that the Chileans were supposed to overthrow Allende. And the Chilean generals said, no, we follow the Chilean constitution. As long as Allende follows the constitution, we're not overthrowing him. And so the U.S. said, well, leave them alone. They're going to do what they want to do. And Henry Kissinger's statement was, yeah, Chile, the most strategic country in the world, like a dagger pointed at the heart of Antarctica, right? It
uh-huh.
has, for America, it has no strategic value. The fact is, the Chilean generals overthrew Allende because he tried to form his own communist militia outside the Constitution. He violated the Constitution, and the generals upheld the Constitution and went after him.
Okay, so it's a very similar situation to Brazil because we had the military dictatorship, the documents are already coming out that we had some people from the Czechoslovak, I'm not sure how to pronounce in English, but from the intelligence of the STB that were working here, but we are
Uh-huh.
having a very great struggle to find anyone from the CIA who was actually in Brazil. Maybe when you read the left-wing books, they will show you proofs like,
The
oh,
CIA,
great
the
company.
CIA was out to lunch, like they usually are.
Uh-huh.
They were out to
So,
lunch. Look, the Soviets got interested in Brazil back in the 1930s, but it didn't work out. They didn't have the right conditions. They had to build organizations. They had to build their strength. They had to infiltrate, and this is a patient work that takes a long time. So they might have ambitions to do something. In 1964, they were premature because the Brazilian people and the Brazilian society had healthy instincts and reacted against the attempts of the Marxists to take over the country. So the country was defended. But then you have decades later, you have the military dictatorship in Brazil ends, and what do? They have uh, this Workers' Party with Lula da Silva, and what do? They posture as if they are somehow left center party, that they are just social democrats. But no, they're in league with Fidel Castro and the Sao Paulo Forum, and they're gradually attempting to create a communist bloc in South America. And
uh-huh.
it's by gradually taking over your country, very gradually taking it over, and this is the way they work. They work by degrees, and the thing is that if the KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov, there's some videos of him on YouTube. Have you seen them?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
And he
He's
talks about
very effective.
ideological subversion. And he says ideological subversion which is also called active measures, and is also can be called psychological warfare. It consists of so altering the consciousness of people that they cannot come to sensible conclusions about political questions, and especially about their own defense, the defense of their property and the defense of their country. And that's what it's all about. And they've succeeded it's taken them many years. They've gotten in Brazil, it's very much like America. You would be surprised how similar America and Brazil are in the way that the communists have gotten into education in Brazil and in America. The curriculum in most of the American states for the public schools was actually formulated in the Soviet Union in the 1970s.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a big
And that's
statement.
that's that's true with your educational programs in Brazil. So this is and so why are there young people running around the street of America tearing down statues of Ulysses S. Grant and George Washington? They pulled down a statue of George Washington last week in Portland, Oregon. They threw a burning American flag on it, and they pulled it down, and nobody stopped them, right?
Yeah, I think that's scary. They're flag burning, they're like throwing down statues. Even here in Brazil and also Portugal, I live in Portugal for a bit as well. They were just throwing like red painting to say like blood in the images of Catholic saints that came from Latin America that were actually like against slavery and everything. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like the,
yeah. Oh,
like they're
they in
attacking the
California here,
symbolic
they pulled down
monuments.
Junipero statues in California. The man who founded the missions, the Catholic missions here in California. Now, why
Yeah,
would they?
right.
Now, he was a very a kind priest who was bringing Christianity to the California Indians. He did a lot for the California Indians, and yet he is representative as some kind of colonial villain. But one of the lawyers of Black Lives Matter uh, has called for the destroying all the churches that have the white Jesus.
I saw it. Mr.
You know,
Sean King, the name Sean King.
Sean King. That's right. So the thing is that how do you get to the point where somebody now why wasn't we had you had a guy on Fox News, and he said if we don't get what we want, we're going to burn this country down. Now he made a terrorist threat on TV. Why wasn't he arrested? If I made a terrorist threat, I would be taken in custody from wherever I was. I could be arrested. He makes a terrorist threat on national television, and he is allowed to walk away. If you
Yeah,
give me what I want, stick them up. I'm going to burn the country down if you don't give me what I want. That's what's going on here in the U.S. See, all my Brazilian friends were saying, "Oh, you have it so nice in America. You're so much a better country off than we are." It's like, no, our conservative movement is hollow. Our anti-communism was shallow. This country is not what the Europeans, and we often people say, "Oh, Europe, it's so bad in Europe. It's so bad in Brazil." No, you don't understand. You do not understand. It's bad everywhere. We all have been done in by the same operation. The same forces have been working against us all, and they've had a similar effect wherever they have been able to operate. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. But I would like to kind of take on the philosophical question here because why they're attacking the symbolic movement like monuments? For example, what it means to burn a flag of the United States. I think you wrote something about that that was very enlightening to me because they were saying something that the flag represents a kind of union that they are trying to break.
The flag represents a what?
Like the American flag represents kind of the union that you guys have under the Constitution, under your values. And when they
Well,
attack this monument, they attack.
it represents the country, basically, the republic. Um, and so when you destroy something, when you burn something, you are in like let's say you burn it, or someone burns your image. That is saying that they want to destroy you. They want to burn
uh,
you. So if they burn you in effigy, that's what they want to do to you in real life, but you just aren't there. So they're burning this effigy. They're burning you in effigy. When you burn a flag, it means you want to burn down the country. You want to overthrow it. When you do that, that's what you want to do. That's what is wanted, and so that's what goes on. So for you to see, for an American who actually loves his country, to see the burning flag on Washington's head of his statue and the statue pulled down, that is enraging. That is a moment. And how come there's no rage in the country? How come there's no reaction? How come this is allowed to go on? Why doesn't the president do anything? Why isn't the army out in the street with tanks rolling over those people? They're enemies of the country, and
I
they're
think that's a
allowed to
great
just
question.
run
I mean,
riot.
why Trump is not doing anything about it? That's what scares
No.
me a lot because no one is doing anything.
You know why they're not doing anything?
Why?
Because of critical race theory. Critical
Can
race
you
theory,
explain?
which was something that a guy named James Cone developed, and it was developed with the help of Fidel Castro and the Cubans. And the idea was that you basically say that if you're white, you're a racist. If you're a capitalist, you're a racist. If you believe in a country having a border, you're a racist. If you're a Republican, you're a racist. If you're an anti-communist, you're a racist, right? So once you get that into people's heads, this is what people think now. I mean, everyday average Joe Americans now, there's many of them that think that if you're a Republican, you're a white supremacist. They think if you believe in America having a border, you're a Marxist. And I mean, I'm sorry, you're a white supremacist. So naturally, if you get accused of being a racist, you lose your job. If you get accused of being a racist, you could be ostracized by society. You could be out on the street. I mean, it's frightening to people. It terrifies people. The idea that they would be called a racist. So this is being used. And you see these pictures of Americans, of police chiefs, of police officers, of neighborhoods of white people getting on their knees. Getting on their knees to what? Black Lives Matter was founded by two Marxists. It's a Marxist revolutionary organization. It's a front. It's a communist front. This is happening right now. They are prevailing. This revolution is succeeding. And it is a communist revolution here on American soil right now.
Yeah, I was seeing like a video of the situation of the Chess Autonomous Zone. I think you heard of it. And you said that, I think, yeah, and I will see a video of the rapper that is in control of the place. He was handing out to people big weapons, I think AR-15s to everyone, assault rifles. And I saw in some of your comments on your website that you had information about his relation to China, something about this. Can you comment on this?
Well, yeah, of course. The Freedom Roads Socialist Organization and the Liberty Roads Organization are connected to China, and they're behind 90%. They've organized and brought the other communist groups into these protests, that they're the ones behind this, and they're connected to Beijing. So, and of course, I talked to a guy who's involved in right and left-wing militias the other day, and he told me that he closely worked with a guy who was in the communist groups in Seattle. And 2 years ago, a Chinese ship offloaded 5,000 small arms weapons, and the communists packed them away in trucks and put them in storage. So yeah, they have thousands of weapons, and it would take the army to root them out of there. And which, by the way, the army says it's a peaceful protest. We believe that the Constitution stands for equality for all. Actually, the Constitution believes that stands for no such thing. No such thing.
Yeah, one thing that kind of like, how come they managed to get this mentality out, and how come so many like big business? I mean, when you think about the clash between capitalism and communist countries, you think that capitalism should resist communism, but we actually see most of the big business in America are pushing forward the same agenda as the communists. How come this is happening in the middle of great revolution?
What is the counterintelligence security regime of a capitalist enterprise? Do they have their own private CIA watching for the communists? No, the communists come. They do business with them. They infiltrate their company. If it's a foundation like the Ford Foundation is giving money to this revolution. Ford Foundation is supporting Freedom Road Socialist Organization, supporting Liberty Roads. So is Leo Strauss. So is George Soros. Yeah, of course, George Soros is a KGB agent, but
just saying, because you mentioned Ford Foundation, and I really needed to say, because I was seeing a very old news about some of the leaders of the founders of the Workers' Party in Brazil. He said that he had a meeting with someone from the Ford Foundation in the 90s, and they were discussing racism in Brazil. And the Workers' Party leader said, "Oh, we don't have racism here." And the guy from the Ford Foundation said, "I'll give you 15 million. And you have racism in Brazil." And he just said in the interview, "I know what this means." So I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
very interesting for you to touch this topic.
Yeah, because this is the justification for a communist revolution. See, the enemy, the core enemy that the communist Chinese and Russians have identified is the white middle class of the United States and Europe. And if they make them evil because they're the inheritors of a white supremacist legacy, then they can exterminate us, just like the way Hitler exterminated the Jews.
Uh-huh.
We could just exterminate them. And if everybody goes, yeah, those white people have too much. We need to get them to, oh, they want their border up. Oh, they want to keep their stuff. Oh, that's racism. We have to take their stuff away. Now that they're resisting, we have to fight them harder, you know.
Yeah, and
So,
I think the correlation between what is happening in America currently resembles a lot what already happened in Brazil in the past. I was talking to you yesterday about this, that the Brazilians have 30,000 homicides in the 90s, and on 2018 we managed to get to 65, and the discourse was all the same, because all the criminals were not actual criminals; they were like victims of the system, victims of society, victims of capitalism in some manner. So all his actions are justified, and you should not arrest people. You should not fund police. It's all solved by communist education, and suddenly we have these bandits out. So I think there is also a connection here with something that I read in the Red Rug, a book of an American guy that was interviewing Jan Sejna, one of the biggest KGB defectors, and he was saying that the KGB was looking forward to the blacks and the Latino communities in America to pull drugs in their communities. I wonder
mhm.
if you have something on the relationship between like this narcos and all this clash that is
Oh,
happening.
yes. Well, Jan Šejna was one of the highest ranking communist officials in communist Czechoslovakia. And Šejna, he was aware of Operation Friendship of Nations, which was an operation to pump drugs into the Western countries, pump drugs into Latin America, the United States, the UK, France, Germany, etc. And of course, the reason for pumping the drugs in is, yeah, it would create more crime and it would allow them to finance organized crime groups that they controlled, and that organized crime could provide intelligence on political, police, and intelligence corruption that they could exploit in the Cold War or in any revolution, but also the laundering of the money. You have hundreds of billions of dollars of drug money to launder. And what do? You take it to major banks and you tempt them. Now, once a bank, let's see, Citibank, decides to launder some of this money, let's say they do that. If they launder this money, then you suddenly have blackmail on banking officials. Suddenly the bank is dirty and you now have leverage over the bank. So when you want to talk about the subversion of capitalism, the drug offensive is one of the elements in the subversion of capitalism that is extremely important. The underground economy, the organized crime are very important elements in the communist revolution. Remember that communists are really political criminals. So it is only natural for them to seek alliances with real criminals, which both the Chinese and the Russians, and of course the FARC and Colombia have done.
Yeah. I was actually reading a lot of stuff because I think Brazilians have forgot a bit to talk about the Foro de São Paulo, and we didn't make anyone responsible for the operation called Foro de São Paulo. And we're not talking about the Fox anymore. It's like that's something that is not happening. But currently, I'm not sure how much aware you are of the current state of the facts in Brazil, but we are seeing that a lot of the supporters of Bolsonaro, like journalists and stuff like this, are going to prisons or like having their lives attacked by judicial activism.
Yeah.
And what kind of lights me is that
Well,
you want to say something?
Well, the period in which the Workers' Party was in control in Brazil was a period of them being able to fill the judiciary and fill the government with their colleagues, with their revolutionary friends. And the same thing happened in the United States with Bill and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Obama, they were able to basically put their people into various places. That's why conservatives have been persecuted under in the administration of Donald Trump. It is no accident, for example, that the revolution here in the U.S. they're calling for and defund the police, get rid of the police and empty the prisons, because they want the criminals to come out. And in terms of persecuting innocent people with the justice system, criminalize the innocent and lionize the guilty. That's the whole formula of the communist revolution. It's an inversion, turn everything on its head. And this way they can intimidate average people into shutting up and going along.
Yeah, and one thing that kind of like messed with my mind there, because we're talking about politics. Politics is necessary even in more healthy times. So one of the problems is how come we can get actual information? How can we lead with information now about actual problems when there is so much subversion, so much disinformation, so much infiltration going on? I think it's kind of the problem. For example, when I was looking at the racial relations in America, you guys have a history of it, a problematic history. But how can we differentiate to the normal people what is like the actual problem and where it starts, the subversion and the propaganda?
Yeah, you see, the thing is, the problem is that the truth is always complicated, that all of our institutions are problematic, that man is not perfect. But here comes the communist, and he promises you a perfect world. We're going to make heaven on earth, and all these people are bad. These people are racist, and these people are capitalist exploiters, and these people don't care about the planet, right? They're into causing pollution or destroying the environment, and oh, they're as pure as rain, but really they're criminals, and all of it is a gimmick to get people to believe in them, and they put their poison everywhere. And people go along with it, and they take over whole countries, and then they stomp on people. They kill people, they suppress them, they throw them in jail. They don't care about people. Like I said, the communists and their allies, whatever label they put on themselves, they are political criminals. And it's in every country. I don't care if it's communist China, the neo-Bolshevik regime of Vladimir Putin in Russia, the regime in Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and the Sandinista scum. They're all the same. They're all criminals, basically at heart, psychopaths.
Yeah, you said about Russia here, so I would like to clarify this to my audience. When you talk about Russia, a lot of people think that Russia today is a different country, it is right-wing, and the Orthodox Church is kind of taking things conservative in Russia. So what is the truth about the current regime of Russia, and show the Brazilian people be afraid of it?
Yeah, that's a big deception. Look, you talk to a real Russian Christian nationalist like Dmitry Savin, who lives in exile in Latvia right now. If you're a real nationalist, if you're a real Christian nationalist in Russia, you will be arrested by Putin's police. You will be put in jail, or you have to run to another country and go into exile. That's the state of real, authentic Russian nationalists in Russia. Putin is a fake nationalist. He's a fake pretender to being a Christian. He wears a cross as a prop to try to puff himself up. No, he's a neo-Bolshevik. He's a KGB officer. And as he himself said a couple of years ago, he said, well, I wasn't a KGB officer. You know, I didn't join the party because I had to be a KGB officer. I joined the party because I like communist ideas. Well, one of the central communist ideas is that religion is the opiate of the masses. That materialism is the dogma behind it. And that's what Vladimir Putin believes. That's what he really believes in. That's who brought him to power. Boris Yeltsin and Gorbachev were playing a game. They were top communist party officials in the Soviet Union. They were pretending, for the sake of this long-range strategy of theirs, to set communism aside, but they never did. And neither has Vladimir Putin.
Okay, referring to the current state of situation, all these problems about racial riots and stuff like this are happening at the same time. We have another different threat that sounds natural. That is the coronavirus, the great virus that spread around all the world. And it's kind of strange that all this virus came exactly from a place that is the enemy of most countries, of Western countries. So, how do you see the idea that the Chinese government might have manufactured the current state of the pandemic?
Oh, I think that they manufactured it and they released it. Well, whether they manufactured it or they just got it from a bat, and they just made it be able to jump from human state to human. You know, normally bad coronaviruses can't go from human to human. So this is rather unusual. And it's sustained for a long time. This is very unusual. There's something funny about this. The disease acts like a blood disease. Of the first 12 people who died in Hamburg, Germany, did you know that 4 of them died of blood clotting?
Oh, I didn't know of that.
Yeah. The thing is that that's why these drugs that fight malaria work with it.
You mean the hydroxychloroquine?
The what?
The hydroxychloroquine? I think that's kind of
Hydroxychloroquine. Yes, hydroxychloroquine is a drug that works with malaria. Malaria affects the red blood cells. This disease affects the red blood cells, and we don't understand. It's very insidious. It has an effect on the red blood cells. It has an effect on the lungs, and it has a blood clotting effect. And it's very poorly understood at this point. But it looks to me, this is the ideal weapon. Look, it mainly attacks the weak and the elderly, right? People who have pre-existing conditions. Normal, healthy person, unless they have a really, they have some other problem, health problem, they're not going to be killed by this. Which means that it's very, if you look at the communist Chinese, they have this one-child policy for 30, 40 years, and then what do they end up with? After 40 years, they have this elderly population because each couple is only allowed to have one child. So you see what's happened in China is, what are they going to do with these elderly people? Are they going to really take care of them in their old age? Or is this virus a way of getting rid of China's elderly population so they don't have to take care of them? And then they spread the virus to other countries, creating an economic panic because guess what? In the West, we protect our old people. We protect our vulnerable. Because why? Because we're Christian, because we believe in the protection of human life. So we get caught in a bind. We can't just say, oh, gee, these people are going to be exposed. And so you have different countries have tried different strategies. Sweden let it spread among the children, and then they just isolated the elderly people. In your country, in Brazil, you can't do that because all the generations live together, right? Typically.
Yeah.
So you infect the children, you're going to infect grandma and grandpa. You're going to affect the older people. So look, if you're over 65, you're in a risk group. And by the way, this helps the communists too, because guess who tends to be conservative? The older people get, the wiser they get, and they become more conservative. And retired elderly people are a huge source of political activism in Western countries and in Latin American countries, in Latin American democracies. So what happens to these elderly people? They get struck down. And who then gets numerically more important? These ignorant younger people who are indoctrinated with the Marxist ideas. This is the ideal Marxist weapon, this COVID-19. It strikes down the wise and the old, and it empowers the young. It helps China get past its financial problems. It paralyzes the Western economies. And it doesn't wipe out the human race. No, it's much more subtle than that. It's a very subtle. It's more than the flu, but it's less than the Black Death. It's kind of in between. When in Brazil you got 1 million cases, you got 50,000 dead. That's about 5%, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right. So, I mean, 5%, but see, it's mostly just sick and elderly. If people have pre-existing conditions, of all those 12 people in Germany, the first 12 to die, that they did the autopsy of in Hamburg, Germany. They were all obese and they all had heart disease. Interesting, huh? They were unhealthy. They ranged from ages of 87 to 52. So it isn't that the disease is a hoax. It's real, but it's very subtle. The way it works is very subtle. And I think we have to understand it's so complex. The communists are very good at coming up with ways of attacking us that challenge us intellectually, challenge our institutions in ways that we cannot really cope with. And so because we're always defending, we're never attacking the communists, we're never going after them because we're always defending against them. We're vulnerable to these repeated attacks. They are now just wearing us down with these attacks. And there's nothing. Now we're becoming increasingly helpless to these attacks. They pull up the first card, it's COVID-19. The second one is the riots. The third one will be maybe terrorism, maybe a wave of assassinations. You see what I mean? Then the economy could collapse. They go after the dollar. They destroy the U.S. economy. The U.S. can't support its armed forces anymore. You have chaos in the U.S. economy. Suddenly, the U.S. Navy stops functioning. The U.S. nuclear forces aren't able to launch anymore. Then they own the planet. Then they own the whole world. Because once they get nuclear supremacy, it's over. End of game.
Yeah, and that would explain the advances they are making in India and Taiwan right now, right? Because even in Brazil, we have receiving threats from China because they didn't want our Congress to even congratulate the anniversary of Taiwan because they don't want us to recognize Taiwan as a country. And we see like the Xinjiang people being killed in the frontier. So do you think that those are like real advance of a concrete war? Like they're planning to do so?
Well, when they feel we're weak enough for them to go after us in an outright war, they will. Xi Jinping said they are going to war. The Times of India said they're either going to war against India, Taiwan, or the U.S. I would say they're going to war against the U.S. But it's a matter of timing. I think it's probably September, October. We have to marinate in this a little while longer before we collapse. They've got to force us to collapse.
Yeah, and what do you think the position of the politics of the lockdown means in all this context? I mean, like we have
Well,
this.
it's a very complicated question because you need to protect your elderly and your vulnerable. And if you don't, you're going to be politically held to account if you don't. But if you do protect them, then your economy goes down. You see, it's like a lose-lose proposition. And that's the brilliance of this weapon, this COVID-19 weapon by the Chinese. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant weapon. So and our reaction, it's like the U.S. doctrine has been, if you attack us, we go to nuclear war with you. The United States, were we going to go to nuclear war with them over this? We probably should have, but we did not because they said, oh, oops, it escaped from a lab. How do we know it didn't? Oh gosh, how do we prove that? We have terrible intelligence. We don't know. Again, we're on the hook. I have to go.
Okay.
Because I have to do another interview, but.
Okay, thank you for being here. I think that's all for today, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Nyquist. That was a very interesting talk. There's a lot more to say.
Thank
have
you.
A lot of stuff to teach us. And I truly hope that we have more conversations like this in future.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Did you